I could not be more excited to make you this video. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how much we won in our fantasy football leagues in 2022. I'm going to show you exactly what our entry fees were as well. That way you can go through and look at that profit margin. And we'll be showing our most drafted players. So we are going to be talking about all things 2022. Could not be more excited about it. But before we get into it, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video. And if you want to get into a 2023 draft with us today, tomorrow, the next day, you know we do these on the live stream nonstop and we've already started. You can find the link to join Underdog Fantasy in the description or in the comment section. On Underdog Fantasy, you can also check out all these cool player props. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And you will get our 2023 rankings. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. But before we dive into the video, I want to show you exactly how we are going to be breaking this down. So we entered into 658 tournament style drafts on Underdog Fantasy. We actually drafted over 700 teams on Underdog this year, but we're not going to be able to look at the private drafts just because those private drafts are really all over the place. It's very hard to get consolidated results on those. And also they're $3 drafts. If we're going to be looking at a year where we won $150,000, if we're going to be looking at 40 $3 drafts, I'm sorry, but from a numbers perspective, $120 doesn't make a difference on 150,000. So it's not worth going through and trying to scrap every little piece of data together. But we still have a 658 team sample to look at. And we are going to be looking at the amount of teams that made the fantasy football playoffs in their tournament style contest. Keep in mind, it's not like your regular fantasy football league. In your regular fantasy football league, 6 out of 12 teams are going to make the fantasy football playoffs. Here in our high stakes leagues, only 4 out of 12 made the fantasy football playoffs. And in our regular leagues, only 2 out of 12 made the fantasy football playoffs, because then you advance to the fantasy football playoff tournament, and every round, it just narrows down the entire player pool. Best Ball Mania, for example, is one of these tournaments that we're going to be looking at that had 451,000 teams drafted. And every round, you had more and more teams getting knocked out to where in the final round for the Fantasy Football Championship, there were less than 500. So to make it to the finals at all in any draft style contest is an unbelievable achievement in these tournaments. But to win a couple is statistically impossible. We're going to dive into exactly what we did. But first, let's look at the high stakes leagues. Now, this is where obviously the majority of our money was spent. We entered into one $1,000 draft, two $500 drafts, and 25 $250 drafts. We are going to be combining all of these $250 draft contests together, and we're going to be looking at our results in this category where 14 out of our 28 total teams made it to the fantasy football playoff tournament. That was an advance rate of 50%. The expected advance rate, whenever you usually only had 4 teams out of the 12 making it, was 33%. So we rushed the regular season there. If we're going to be looking at our lower stakes buy-in, you have the Pomeranian, which was a $3 draft contest. You have the puppy drafts, which were $5 draft contests. And there, if we go category by category, in the Pomeranian, we entered in 25 teams. 7 of them advanced to the playoffs, which was good for an advance rate of 28. And the average advance rate would have been 16%. So we crushed the regular season there. The puppy one, we drafted 133 teams. We advanced 47 of them, which was an advance rate of 35%. The expected rate was 16%. So we were double compared to average. Puppy 2, 70. We advanced 12, 17% advance rate, 16% expected. So we weren't great. We were slightly above average, but nothing to write home about. Puppy 3, 112 teams drafted, 27 teams advanced, 24% R rate, 16% expected. We crushed. Puppy 4, we had a 26% advance rate compared to the 16% expected. So even in the lower stakes draft contest, where this was more so practice for us in those high stakes leagues, we had a better advance rate than average in every single draft contest. That is a sample size of, a ridiculous. And I repeat, ridiculous. I can't even add this up on Excel right now. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's look at Best Ball Mania. This is the main event draft on Underdog Fantasy, $25 buy-in, where we maxed it out drafting 150 teams, where we advanced 43 to the fantasy football playoffs. That was a 29% advance rate. The average was 16%. We crushed. Best Ball Resurrection. These were drafts that were completed during the season. The contest locked in week 5, and then it played from week 6 to week 14, and we drafted 86 teams there. 33 made the fantasy football playoffs, and that was a 38% advance rate compared to the 16% expected. So across the board, in every single draft category, we advanced more teams than average. And most of those categories, we doubled the expected advance rate. Please find anybody that can show you results this good. But hell, not only do you have to get into the fantasy football playoff tournaments, but you have to make some real money. The real money is won in the fantasy football playoff tournaments there, where that's where, dear God, I mean, we got lucky. Okay, there's no other way to put it. There's no way, even if you're the best drafter in the world, you could repeat these results. I'm never going to be able to expect it to do this again. In those high stakes leagues, we had 4 teams make the finals. We had 2 teams in the Big Dog make the finals. We had a team in the Big Dog 2 make the finals. And we had a team in the Bulldog 2 make the finals. That was the $500 draft contest on Underdog. We had a team make the finals in Puppy 4. We had a team make the finals in Best Ball Mania. And we had a team make the finals in Best Ball Resurrection. I want to reiterate, having one team out of this large sample make the finals, I probably would have been pretty happy with. To make it to the finals when they weed you down so aggressively during those 2 weeks of the playoffs, where you're put into like 18 team player pools and then only 2 advance, and that's the cream of the crop. Unbelievable. Just making it to the finals, I was unbelievably excited. I was over the moon. And what ended up happening, I could never imagine. We ended up winning 2 of these high stakes leagues. First off, in Best Ball Mania, I believe we finished around 18th, 16th, 17th, something like that. I can pull it up right now. Out of 451,000 teams. Like, that is absurd in its own right. We finished 16th. Finished 16th in Best Ball Mania, which is already an incredible accomplishment. But the Big Dog, the largest high stakes draft tournament on Underdog Fantasy, $250 buy-in. We finished first. Numero uno. We won $100,000 with that one team. Right? Like I said, the probability of this happening is so small. It's minuscule, where I could never expect this to happen to us again. So many things had to go right. We had to have an incredible season drafting. I mean, we were at the very top of our game. I can't find someone with better results. And B, we had to get incredibly lucky in several steps along the way. Like you would naturally assume that you have to in a fantasy football tournament style contest or a poker tournament, whatever you're going to be looking at, a large field tournament. To get first, you have to have the combination of everything going in your favor and also a really good skill set to begin with. So it's crazy that we won that high stakes league. Unbelievable. Mathematically, it doesn't make sense. But what gets really obnoxious is the fact that we won another high stakes league. The fact that our $500 buy-in in the Bulldog 2, we won this one as well. This was a $100,000 prize pool. We took down first place for $20,000. So we ended up winning 2 high stakes tournaments on Underdog. Like I said, lucky, so many different areas along the way. There's no other way to explain this. But if we are looking at the final results that we had this season, we ended up spending $14,780 on entry fees in these Underdog tournament contests. Our winnings totaled to be $150,000, 738 as well. But just call it $150,000. So we 10x'd our money That means if we went through and drafted $14,000 worth of teams for the next 9 years and lost every single season and did not make a penny back for the next 9-10 years, we will still have made a profit. I haven't had a losing season with fantasy football since I think like 2014. Since we started playing Dynasty with a large sample, we've won every single year. I've never had a winning year like this. I doubt I will ever be able to repeat this. Please don't think following this channel is going to give you the same results. I promise you, we got so damn lucky. What did help is if you're going to look at our most drafted players on Underdog this year, Josh Jacobs was our number one guy. Now, keep in mind, Josh Jacobs didn't help us in either of the big tournaments that we won, but he did help us have an incredible advance rate, and that's why we crushed pretty much every single tournament we entered. Our number two most drafted player was Patrick Mahomes. If you don't remember, we were getting Patrick Mahomes in the middle of the 5th round. We are getting Patrick Mahomes a full round behind Justin Herbert. Something that I did not understand at the time, and something I still don't understand how people let that happen for us. And our third most drafted player was Jalen Waddle. So if you look at our 3 most drafted players, our most drafted guy was the biggest hit in fantasy football. Sometimes that's all it takes. But then our second most drafted guy was the biggest hit at quarterback, arguably right there with Jalen Hurts. And we had one of the biggest hits at wide receiver with Jalen Waddle. Of course, we had some misses along the way. But if you understand how fantasy football and numbers in general operate, getting that big hit is everything. You can have 5 misses as long as you have the number one hit in fantasy football. You're not going to get exact results like this. You have to get lucky in other areas as well. But you're going to have good results. Our second most drafted running back was Kenneth Walker. So I want to reiterate, we are never going to be able to repeat this. We had to get extremely lucky in multiple different areas. But based on these advance rates, based on the fact that we just took down multiple high stakes tournaments in the same season. I know people won more money than us on Underdog. Like you had $2 million for Best Ball Mania first place, $1 million for second place on Best Ball Mania. But if you're looking at the sample size that we dominated with, I would say we probably had better results than anybody else this season. So I don't know. Very, very proud of what we did. I don't want to try to go out there and lose it all next year. Like, I'm going to be very realistic, knowing that we cannot repeat this. But let me know what you think. Let me know how your season went. I'm just very happy with myself. And of course, if you want to get in one of these drafts with us next year, you can find the link in the comment section, find the link in the description. Promo code FLOCK. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. Just please don't think that anybody's going to be able to repeat this. This was a season that will probably never happen again. But thank you again. I appreciate you. 2022 was a hell of a year, and looking forward to 2023.